I'm nicodehaan, and welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a more balanced and natural wild world.
To recover our natural health, regain our rights and freedoms, and I'm Ellen DeHaan.
It's a beautiful day in Durango, Colorado. Right now it's 36 degrees, going down to 15 tonight, and a high today of 46 degrees.
Yeah, it's been a little warmer than...
Yeah, and all of a sudden it'll cool down, and maybe we'll get some snow by Thanksgiving. I think that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And we haven't been around for a couple of weeks. Last week we weren't quite feeling right. We had a little coughing and sniffling. So
respiratory distress is going around.
Seems like it's over now, so that's good. Had no fever or anything, so I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, it's definitely just a cold.
Yeah. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Odysee channel. Hit the follow button, hit the like button, help our channel grow. We also post on Facebook and LinkedIn. And if you hit the link below the show notes, you'll get information from Mother Earth Labs to maximize your nutrition with the products from them. And these are products that we use to supplement our health, and we highly recommend their services and the products. We look at mainstream news stories about anti-aging, natural health, history, and climate, as well as our freedom, and we do our own analysis. We suggest you do the same thing. All topics for today's show are in the show notes listed below. There's a video in there, I think. No, there's some videos. There's some videos linked in a couple of the articles that we're talking about. Anyway, if you have any questions or comments, you can hit the link below the show notes. There's nicodehaan@me.com. You can put the comments in YouTube or Odysee, even on Facebook, and we'll get to them in due time. Okay, we're going to start off today, and we're really, I think, mainly doing the same kind of conversation as we were doing before, talking about metabolic disease. And yeah, let's get rid of that. There we are. Still getting used to this program here. But the first article is genetically modified foods, their safety, risks, and public concerns. This is a review from the National Institute of Health.gov. So genetically modified is a special set of gene technology that alters the genetic machinery of such living organisms as animals, plants, or microorganisms.
Combining genes from different organisms is known as recombinant DNA technology, and the resulting organism is said to be genetically modified, or we call it GMO, a genetically modified organism.
Yeah, the principal, there's also the genetically engineered or transgenic. The principal transgenic crops grown commercially in a field are herbicide and insecticide-resistant soybeans, corn, cotton, and canola. In other words, you can spray the crap out of these things and then you eat them, and they're not affecting the plant. The problem is do they affect us?
I think that these are herbicide and insecticide resistant.
Yeah. So you can use the poisons on them.
Yeah.
But it's not going to affect the plants.
It's not going to affect the plants, but it's going to be sitting on the plants. So when they're harvested and processed, the herbicides and insecticides.
Well, I was in the pest control business for a lot of years. And one of the things we did when we used products like herbicides and insecticides, they had a thing called a sticker, which was a chemical that made it stick to the plant. And you really can't get it off afterwards. Now, I'm sure they do some kind of sanitation and cleaning and things like that. But, you know, this is a problem.
Highly processed.
Yep.
Yeah, cotton and canola, soybeans and corn. Okay, other crops grown commercially and or field tested are sweet potatoes resistant to a virus that could destroy most of the African harvest. Rice with increased iron and vitamins that may alleviate chronic malnutrition in Asian countries, and a variety of plants that are able to survive weather extremes.
Yeah, so they're using these to increase the yield.
Increase the yield and make them more hardy.
Yeah, and as we will go into the more of the discussion of this, we find that we really don't know the long-term effects of these
let's
things.
Go on.
Yes, there are.
Go ahead. There are bananas.
Yeah, there are bananas that produce human vaccines against infectious diseases such as hepatitis B, fish that mature more quickly, fruit and trees that yield nut trees that yield crops, abundance earlier, and plants that produce new plastics with unique properties.
Oh boy.
Technologies are for genetically modified foods offer dramatic promise for meeting some areas of the greatest challenge for the 21st centuries.
But like all technologies, they also pose some risks, known and unknown. Controversies and public concern surrounding GM foods, GM being genetically modified, not General Motors, and crops commonly focus on human and environmental safety, labeling and consumer choice, intellectual property rights, ethics, food security, poverty reduction, and environmental conservation.
Yeah, so with this new technology on gene manipulation, what are the risks of tampering with Mother Nature? What effects will this have on the environment? What are the health concerns that consumers should be aware of? And is recombinant technology really beneficial?
So let's look at that in a little more depth. It's very interesting because I tend to think of GMO as something that's been around since the 80s, But according to this article, scientists first discovered in 1946 that DNA could be transferred between organisms. The first genetically modified plant was produced in 1983. Okay, so that's where I got that from.
Yep.
Using an antibiotic-resistant tobacco plant. And China was the first country to commercialize the transgenic crop in the early 1990s with the introduction of virus-resistant tobacco.
Yeah, in 1994, transgenic flavor saver tomato was approved by the Food and Drug Administration for the marketing in the USA.
Modification allowed the tomato to delay ripening after picking.
Yeah, in 1995, few transgenic crops received market approval.
And this included canola with modified oil composition.
Yeah, and corn with
certain strain of corn maize.
Yeah,
cotton resistant to the herbicide Bromoxynil.
Yeah, that's a herbicide.
And cotton that was patented by Monsanto.
Yeah, potatoes that were by Monsanto, and soybeans resistant to herbicide glyphosate. Glyphosate, yes.
Which again is a poison to humans. It's been long known, and it is again a Monsanto product. Virus-resistant squash and other delayed ripening tomatoes, and a total of 35 approvals have been granted to commercially grow 8 transgenic crops and 1 flower crop of carnations.
Yeah, as of 2011, the U.S. leads a list of multiple countries in the production of GM crops. Currently, there are a number of food species in which a genetically modified version exists. Some foods that are available in the market include cotton, soybeans, canola, potatoes, eggplant, strawberries, corn, tomatoes, lettuce, cantaloupe, carrots, etc.
Mm. And then products that are GMO products, which are currently in the pipeline, include medicines and vaccines, foods and food ingredients, feeds, animal feeds, and fibers.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that they're now using the term GM instead of GMO. Mm-hmm. And that always makes you think of the car company and not so much of the poisons thing. I don't know if that's intentional.
And O is an organism.
Yeah.
And that they may have realized that saying a genetically modified organism puts people in mind of worms crawling in their food or, who knows what. So they switched. But for purposes of this article and to avoid people immediately thinking of General Motors, I'm just going to say GMO.
Yeah. At present, there are several GM crops used as food sources. As of now, there are no animals approved for use as food, but genetically modified salmon has been proposed for FDA approval, not yet approved as of this article.
And then the product is directly in instances when the product is directly consumed as food, then that's one thing. But in most cases, crops that have been genetically modified are sold as commodities
and used in ingredients. So when we talk about processed food and highly processed food, you can be guaranteed that these products are in those. And that's probably the real danger. I think if you combine foods together and they're not modified in any way, they're probably a heck of a lot healthier than if
you don't have interactions and reactions.
Yeah,
and chemicals.
because we have no long-term testing. I mean, remember, most of these foods are just 20 years old. So they're just starting to get into the first generation. We already see the ramifications of this, I think, in just the way we see the population of gaining weight and having all these comorbidities together, like the diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and type 1 rising in young children. So that's the second generation. And then we have, of course, all these heart diseases. And now what we're going to talk about in the next articles after this GM is the connection between food, our digestive system, and the mental aspects of this.
All right, so let's keep going with this article.
Okay.
And then there's a genetically modified food called the new leaf potato that uses naturally occurring bacteria found in the soil. And it was made to provide in-plant protection against the Colorado potato beetle.
Oh, no.
And it was brought to market by good old Monsanto in the late 1990s and developed for the fast food market.
Yeah, as of 2005, about 30% of the zucchini grown in the U.S. Yes.
They withdrew the potato from the market in 2001 because it didn't sell. So that was, and there were also some problems with export problems.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
One of the biggest culprits, I think, now is vegetable oils. So it's reported that there is no or a significantly small amount of protein or DNA remaining in vegetable oil extracted from the original genetically modified crops in the United States. Vegetable oil is sold to consumers as cooking oil, margarine, or shortening, and is used in prepared foods.
Vegetable oil is made of triglycerides extracted from plants or seeds and then refined. And it may be further processed via hydrogenation to turn the liquid oils into solids.
Yeah, this refining process removes nearly all of the non-triglyceride ingredients. And cooking oil, margarine, and shortening may also be made from several other crops. A large percentage of canola produced in the United States is GM. I think most of it, GMO, actually is probably 99% the canola.
And canola oil is the third most widely consumed vegetable oil in the world.
Remember, this was never consumed before the 1970s or 80s because it wasn't allowed. It was mostly used in production of ball bearings, used to as a lubricant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just they've adapted. They keep taking plants and trying to repurpose them.
Well, one
and
of the
also
scientists
use what after the processing, there's something left over, so they use that for animal feed.
Yeah,
they're trying not to waste anything and maximize their profit.
Yeah, it's a huge
and the genetic modifications in canola oil were made for providing resistance to herbicides such as glyphosate and glufosinate, and also for improving the oil composition. And after removing the oil from the seed, then they use the meal that's left is for animal feed. It's a key ingredient in many foods. It's sold directly to consumers as margarine or cooking oil, and it has many non-food uses, which includes making lipstick. Yeah,
and another thing too, if you're not eating grass-fed meats, then you can be sure this is what they're feeding the cattle in these big livestock
some kind of
compounds.
Grains, right?
So maize is also involved in this. The remaining
a good amount of maize harvested goes for livestock feed, including distillers' grains.
Yeah, and they also use it. The main product of this is high fructose corn syrup. So all your high fructose corn syrup is made from this GMO types of products.
But also it's used for ethanol, which is in the gasoline.
Which I don't mind them using it for.
Right. We like corn-derived gasoline.
Yeah, and then of course it's used to in fast food preparations. So they use it in mayonnaise. So all these mayonnaise packages have this in it.
Yeah, you have to look at you really have to look at the labels.
So you'll see high fructose corn syrup on a lot of labels, but if there's a small percentage, they don't really have to list it.
Yeah, and usually it's the second or third ingredient.
Yeah. And the other thing, that cottonseed oil has been used in salad and cooking oil for a long time. In the old days, it was made from much better products when all of a sudden cottonseed oil became an edible product, I guess.
Yeah, corn oil was used also to fry potato chips, French fries. It's used in sauces and soups. And I assume if you're eating in a restaurant, you're probably getting some of this oil.
Yeah. Now, sugar is top of the list here. Out of domestically grown crops, half of it's grown from sugarcane, and the other half is from the beets, sugar beets.
Mm-hmm.
But all of it now, I'd say 95% of it says here, of the
In
sugar
the
beets
US.
in the U.S. is now a plant resistant to glyphosate. Glyphosate.
Sugar beets that are herbicide tolerant have been approved in Australia, Canada, Colombia, the EU, Japan, Korea, Mexico, New Zealand, the Philippines, the Russian Federation, Singapore, and the US.
Well, it's the cheap way to go. If you want to make a profit and you want to be in the food business, this is the trend that's happening. And hopefully with this new administration coming in, I'm hoping that they address this, because this seemed to be part of the whole thing they were talking about.
The platform
with the platform.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm hoping that is the case. We don't know as of yet.
Oh, well, this is interesting. The last sentence in this paragraph says, the sugar produced from genetically modified sugar beets is highly refined, contains no DNA or protein, and it is sucrose, the same as the sugar you get from a non-GM sugar beet. Right. So you wonder, what's the point?
It's not good.
Yeah.
So we go down the list. There's a lot more to talk about here, but we're going to hit the main points about what's going on with these GMO foods. And now we're going to talk about the food merits and the demerits, as they say.
Yeah, and it says, before we think of having genetically modified food, it is important to know about its advantages and disadvantages, especially with respect to its safety. These foods are made by inserting genes of other species into their DNA.
Yeah, by modifying the DNA system of these foods, the properties causing allergies are eliminated successfully. Now, these are allergies to the plants?
Yeah, apparently.
Yes. These foods grow faster than foods that are grown traditionally. Probably because, is this anything to do with people maturing quicker? And
the hormone, that was a hormonal
thing. I'm thinking there's direct connection. It kind of makes sense when you look at this.
Yeah, Ty says genetically food crops can be grown in places with unfavorable climate conditions. They can withstand drought. They can also grow where the soil is generally not conducive to extensive agriculture. You get more food because they grow faster and you get increased productivity.
Yeah, though the seeds for such foods are quite expensive, their cost of production is reported to be less than the traditional crops due to the natural resistance and pests and insects. However, a lot of these seeds do not regerminate.
Right.
So 1 year old. Now they have to be bought again and again, where the farmers used to grow the plant to maturity, capture the seeds so they could use them next year. So in the long run, I don't think there's really any savings here.
No, and not only that, but when a lot of these GM products were patented, and when the wind blew the seed into the neighboring field, the farmer was then prosecuted for stealing proprietary seeds.
I've heard of many of those stories.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. The biggest threat caused by GMO foods is that they have harmful effects on the human body.
Really?
Shocking, right? It is believed that consumption of these genetically engineered foods can cause the development of diseases which are immune to antibiotics. Of course, we see that, don't we?
Yeah, and the foods are new inventions, so we don't really know what the long-term effect is going to be on human beings. And as the health effects are unknown, many people don't really stay away from GM foods. Manufacturers do not mention on the label that foods are developed by genetic manipulation, as they think it would affect their business, which is obviously not in the public interest.
Yeah, many religious and cultural communities are against such foods because we see it as an unnatural way of producing foods.
And many people are also not comfortable with the idea of transferring animal genes into plants and vice versa. Imagine that. Jeez.
Also, this cross-pollination method can cause damage to other organisms that thrive in the environment.
There's a balance. There's a biological and ecological balance on the planet.
Experts are also of the opinion that with the increase of such foods, developing countries would start depending more on the industrial countries because it's likely that the food production would be controlled by them in the times to come.
Yeah, and it goes on, talks about the soybeans, the potatoes, the rice, cotton, the peas, and then they get down to an article, a section about allergies, and
You're talking about the mice,
yeah,
feeding mice with
farm workers who were exposed to a particular pesticide were shown to have developed skin sensitization and IgE antibodies to the spore extract from that pesticide. With their sera, it may now be possible to test for the allergenic potential of GM crops expressing the Bt toxin. It's all the more important because Bt toxin has been shown to be a potent oral, nasal antigen and adjuvant. So, risks and controversy. Okay. Let's see what that says. There are controversies around GM food on several levels, including whether food produced with it is safe, whether it should be labeled, and if so, how, whether agricultural biotechnology and what? Well, I think there's an extra word in here. Is needed to address world hunger now or in the future. And more specifically, with respect to intellectual property and market dynamics, environmental effects of GM crops, and GM crops' roles in industrial agriculture more generally.
Yeah, many problems include the risks of tampering with Mother Nature, the health concerns that consumers should be aware of, and the benefits of the recombinant technology will also arise with pest resistance and herbicide resistant plants. The evolution of resistant pests and weeds, termed superbugs and superweeds, is another problem.
Nature finds a way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Resistance can involve whatever selective pressure is strong enough. If these cultivars are planted on a commercial scale, there will be strong selective pressure in that habitat, which could cause the evolution of resistant insects in a few years and completely nullify the effects of the GM.
Yeah, another issue they talk about is the uncertainty of whether pest-resistant characteristics of these crops can escape into their weedy relatives, causing resistance and increased weeds. Well, that kind of makes sense. We've seen that before.
Sure it does.
And we've all seen Jurassic Park.
Yeah, right. Just because you can do it, should you?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more here. The potential risks accompanied by disease-resistant plants deal mostly with viral resistance. Is it possible that viral resistance can lead to the formation of new viruses and therefore new diseases? Have we seen any of those new diseases or viruses, at least, lately?
Does the year 2020 ring a bell?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, health risks associated with genetically modified foods are concerned with toxins, allergens, or genetic hazards. So there are three main categories. And there's been a number of studies done, but they haven't really reached any conclusions or anything to be able to control.
Yeah, and do they want any? Most of the agencies seem to be captured. In other words, there's a flow between these Monsanto companies and other companies like that, and the FDA and the CDC and the Institute of Health. These people seem to go back and forth, and you've got to wonder, is there a psychological parallel there, or certainly there's a
financial.
financial investment.
Yeah, because if Monsanto is funding your research, they're expecting a positive result in their favor.
Yeah, so most of the research now is funded by or to the FDA and to the Centers of Disease Control, and these other agencies are funded directly by the manufacturer of these products,
the vested
interest, and the people who are doing, like these large companies like Pfizer and Moderna. They're getting a lot of money to these things, so you can see the correlation there. Not only are the people passing through these agencies, the money is too. So it doesn't seem like there's any independent research anymore. It's all research that is designed to give you a certain conclusion because the interest
to support the conclusion.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there are issues with traceability. You can't, whether you can actually determine the lineage of the genetic modification and so on. And then there was way down in the list, there is called gene transfer studies in human volunteers. See if you can find that. It's pretty far down.
Go ahead.
Researchers identified there were 7 volunteers provided with genetically modified soy to see if the DNA of the soy transferred to the bacteria that lives in the human gut. They identified that 3 of the 7 volunteers had trans genes from the GM soy transferred into the bacteria living in their gut, but that was before the start of the experiment. As this low frequency transfer did not increase after consumption of the GM soy, researchers concluded that the gene transfer did not occur during the experiment. In volunteers with complete digestive tracts, the trans gene did not survive passage through the intact gastrointestinal.
So 7 people, I don't think is a large study.
Not statistically significant.
No. And then there's a thing about some future developments and all the references. So that's
there's
pretty
a
much
lot of material in here, just if you're interested in genetically modified foods.
Yeah.
A lot more substance.
Okay. The next subject is really about brain energy, and this comes from Psychology Today, the metabolic theory of mental illness.
Now, this is something.
So last show, we were talking about the physical effects of the digestive problems that we're having with these foods.
The gut-brain connection.
The gut and health connections like heart disease, like diabetes. But now we're moving on to the mental part of it.
Yeah, does what you eat affect your mental process and mental illness? And
so these disorders are growing crises and are the leading cause of disability on the planet. Although we have many treatments to offer, they fail to work for far too many people.
Depression is now the single most disabling illness above heart failure, back pain, cancer, and other conditions. Even though we have dozens of antidepressants, different types of psychotherapy, electroconvulsive therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, ketamine, and other treatments available. Although the problems with access to mental health care might explain some of these increases, even when people get treatment, it often fails to put the illnesses into full and lasting remission. And I know there's so many commercials for pharmaceuticals now. Every single program we watch, we basically watch. We don't watch anything live, so we're not stuck with commercials. But when you can see, there are so many commercials for depression and anxiety now.
Yeah. So in the end, it's because no one can answer the fairly simple question: what causes mental illnesses? So now this new book called Brain Energy.
1 second. Traditionally, the mainstream philosophy about it was there are some factors such as neurotransmitters, genetics, hormones, inflammation, substance abuse, trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and good old stress.
Yep.
Okay, now.
Yeah, so there's a new book called Brain Energy. The author argues that mental disorders are metabolic disorders of the brain. This new theory integrates decades of clinical neuroscience genetic and metabolic research. It includes all the biological, physiological, or psychological, social factors that we know play a role in mental illness and combines them into one unified theory.
Okay, so what is metabolism? Many people think metabolism is burning calories, but it's actually more than that. Metabolism is the process that all living organisms use to convert food into energy or building blocks for proteins, membranes, and other cell parts. It is fundamental to the definition of life. When there are problems with metabolism, there will be problems in the way that cells function. The author argues that metabolic dysfunction in brain cells can explain all of the symptoms of mental illness.
Yeah, for example, mitochondria plays a critical role in the production and regulation of neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and GABA.
GABA.
GABA. They also play a key role in the production of key hormones such as cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. Mitochondria actually help to control the expression of genes in the cell nuclei, and they play key roles in inflammation.
And that sounds pretty important.
Yeah, by understanding the science of the metabolism in mitochondria, we can finally connect the dots of the mental illness. And they talk here about
And that was just an introduction to this topic. So let's go to the next one.
Okay. So the next one is called 3 questions.
5 questions.
5 questions.
On the connection between metabolism and mental health. So this one gets a little bit more into the topic. Recent data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reveals that more than 40% of American adults are classified as obese. 36% report symptoms of anxiety, depression, or both. And this was according to a clinical assistant professor, Shabani Sethi, in psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Stanford University. The 2 epidemics are closely linked. So this is an article in which they
asked some questions.
They interviewed him.
Yes.
Okay. So the first question.
First question is, how do you define metabolic psychiatry?
And it says metabolic psychiatry is a new subspecialty focusing on targeting and treating metabolic dysfunction to improve mental health outcomes. Growing evidence points to a connection between mental illness and altered metabolism in the brain. Thus, treatment addressing this dysfunction may improve patient outcomes.
Yeah, the rate of metabolic conditions are already very high in the general population. One study found that up to 88% of American adults have poor metabolic health, and in people with psychiatric diseases, the rates are higher. In fact, research from the Stanford Medicine colleagues suggests that developing a metabolic disorder such as insulin resistance can double your risk for depression, even if you have no prior history of any mental illness.
For a long time, doctors have thought of nutrition as a secondary therapy, an add-on to medications that might lower blood pressure or improve diabetes. But the researcher, has realized that nutritional metabolic therapy can serve as a significant medical intervention for mental illness, and one that can change the structure and function of the brain. And they took lessons from their neurology colleagues who had recognized more than 100 years ago that there were links between metabolism in the brain and body, and that led to successfully treating pediatric epilepsy with a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense because remember we watched a bunch of, and this was quite a few years ago, veterinarian shows.
Yeah. Dr. Jeff and
a bunch of them, and they were really highly successful. And these people counted on these veterinarians to make their animals well. Mm-hmm. And always the first question was, "Did you change the feed?
What are you feeding?
What are you feeding the animals?" So that's.
But they don't ask you that when you go to the doctor. When a human goes to the doctor.
Exactly. So.
Okay, so now number 2, the second question was. It's easy to see how mental illness could lead to conditions such as obesity or diabetes because someone who's struggling mentally might be unable to eat well or exercise. But you, the researcher, are saying that the reverse is also true. So how does that work?
Well, patients who are diagnosed with a full episode of
First,
first episode of schizophrenia, before they're even treated with medications, already have disruptive insulin and glucose metabolism in the brain.
and as insulin resistance develops, the brain becomes leakier, meaning more substances can pass through the blood-brain barrier and get into the brain tissue.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of a leaky gut,
Yeah.
which I had for many years from eating cereal, and it
you
stopped.
ate too much carbs.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
This results in a buildup of toxic substances that increases inflammation. And the researcher says they are seeing significantly more inflammation in the brains of people with mental illness, especially in treatment-resistant patients, over that of healthy people.
Yeah, another question is, can you tell us more about the ketogenic diet and why it might be beneficial for some patients with severe mental illness?
Yeah, and he talks generically about the diet. He says it's a very low carbohydrate, high fat diet with moderate protein intake. Patients on the diet avoid bread, rice, pasta, cereals, and consume whole foods like eggs, avocado, nuts, fish, and chicken. And vegetarians can also go on the keto diet, but they're food options.
So one of the things he mentions in the very beginning, he says, I want to stress that the ketogenic diet is not for everybody. And this is kind of an old way of thinking.
Yes.
They were thinking, no, this is only for the treatment of certain brain things, like if you have seizures and stuff like that. They would bring people
for epilepsy.
For epilepsy, they would bring people into ketosis, and that would solve the problem mainly. And they just weren't at that point, and this was back in the 80s, they weren't at the point of saying, well, this is a healthy diet for everybody. Of course, we've been on this diet for almost 18 years or so, and even more severely into the doing away with more and more vegetables because of the risks of some of the things that we talked about with the GM foods.
Right.
If we went to Europe, we'd probably be able to eat more bread. We'd probably eat more vegetables because they're not contaminated the way they are here. Even with getting organically grown, the rain still falls on them, and all these poisons are in the clouds
and in the soil.
And in the soil. And we're even secluded here. So in the valley in Durango, they're growing many of these local crops, and they're a heck of a lot better than they are if you go out into the plains.
On the front range.
Yeah, on the front range even. Yeah,
the big city.
We're pretty lucky here, but we still feel a lot better not consuming as much of those because we found we really don't need them. It's nice to have them. We do have them occasionally, but we don't have them as a staple anymore. And I think that's the really key to remaining as healthy as we are.
Well, and according to the answer from this researcher, he says ketogenic diets have been used for decades to treat pediatric epilepsy and other neurodegenerative conditions. Yeah. And there's a lot of research that shows that ketogenic diets increase the growth of mitochondria and reduce inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain. So they haven't linked up, all those studies had not specifically looked at the connection to mental illness, but I think the focus is shifting.
No doubt about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next article.
Let's see. There's another question. This one is
what brain energy, new hope?
I have that one here.
Well, anyway, all right, let's go to a gut doctor.
Yeah, this last article here was pretty interesting, and we meant to bring it up during Halloween.
Oh, yeah. This year, we gave a lot of thought to Halloween this year because for the past 3 years, we had been, had all the lights on. We're welcoming the trick-or-treaters, had bags and bags and bags, tens of dollars of candy.
Yeah.
And we suddenly stopped and went, wait a minute.
Well, we also try to look at the candy and say, okay, we want the healthiest kind of candy. It's even if you eat those in quantity, it's not going to be good for you.
Well, sugar rush it for sure.
Yeah.
Within a day or so.
And we'd like to see the transition. Personally, I would like to see the transition of this becoming more of a thing, not so much about the candy, but a little bit more about the whole thing about Halloween, where you get scary stuff happening and people in the costumes. Those things are nice, but maybe focusing now of a new tradition where we can actually bring some decent food to people. Maybe make it not like you're going to 100 homes or 20 homes. Maybe you're going to 2 or 3, and they have food there that you can actually eat and not take home. I'd like to see that transition, make it more of a party situation. And in this day and age, it makes more sense than roaming the streets.
And especially in subdivisions where they don't have lights on the roads.
Yeah, we're lucky here. We have a pretty close community.
Yeah, and there were quite a few trick-or-treaters, but we
went out to dinner with some friends.
Yeah, we decided to close up the house, turn off the lights, and go out and leave the area, and not contribute to the poisoning of the children.
We're lucky we're not in a neighborhood where vandalism would be going on because the kids are pissed off because there's nobody here.
Right.
So let's go to
and there were a number of people that put up that had little displays in their driveways and welcomed the children. And, there was plenty for the children to do.
Yeah, and mostly in our neighborhood, we had like spots of houses that were all lit up. People were outside, and that's where the kids came. And then you could see 2 or 3 houses that were dark. Kids would just bypass them.
Oh, plus there were a lot of adults out with the
children.
So they were supervised.
Yeah.
But we didn't. So we went out to dinner and enjoyed the parade in downtown with all the costumes, and the downtown Main Avenue did a trick or treat for the children. You could go in the different stores and so on. And so that was good. All right. So we looked at this article and thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I got that. A doctor explains the link between Halloween candy and your gut microbiome.
Yeah, it says, I'm just going to skip to the 3rd paragraph here. Okay. Sugar and other ingredients in Halloween treats can cast a sickly spell on the trillions of microorganisms that reside in your gut, collectively known as the gut microbiome. As a gastroenterologist and gut microbiome researcher at the University of Washington School of Medicine, the author of this article, who is Christopher Damon, says he's dedicated his career to decoding the cipher of how food affects the microbial community within your gut.
So what does all this candy do to your gut? And I remember, back when I was 13 years old, having that big bag of candy and then having it home going, wow, this is awesome. And then eating it and of course having trouble getting sleep. And the next few days hadn't been good, but the candy would last a couple of weeks. You'd have so much of it. I don't know if that's the experience these days.
I'm sure it is. But these days parents generally take the candy, divide it up.
Yeah, maybe so.
And,
the smart ones.
Dole it out. But it says, in a healthy state, your gut microbiome acts like a microbial factory. It digests nutrients your body can't, such as fiber and colorful health-conferring plant compounds called polyphenols. And it produces important molecules called metabolites that protect against infection and support brain health. It also regulates metabolism and the transformation of food into useful components that power and grow your cells.
Yeah, a balanced diet keeps your gut microbiome cauldron churning smoothly, but the concentrated sugar, saturated fat, and additives in sugar can throw
in candy.
Well, yeah, can throw your dietary
your microbiome
into distress by feeding inflammatory microbes that weaken the gut barrier, the protective lining that separates your microbiome from the rest of your body.
And once that gut barrier is breached, even friendly microbes can stir up inflammation, causing health issues ranging from overweight to obesity, infections, autoimmune disease, and mild cognitive impairment, all the way up to Alzheimer's.
Yeah, there's a YouTube video in here that you can check in to. Sugar and inflammation impair your microbiome's ability to digest the food, regulate metabolism. Instead of producing healthy byproducts such as butyrate from fiber and urolithin A from polyphenols, candy lacking these nutrients might trick your system into storing more fat, providing less energy for your muscles and your brain.
Too much candy can also affect your immune system, A healthy gut microbiome helps your immune system distinguish between friend and foe, reducing the risk of infections and autoimmune disorders. Sugar and inflammation undermine the microbiome's role in training the immune system to distinguish between the harmful invaders and the harmless substances. Without a carefully calibrated immune system, your body may not effectively clear infections or may strongly react to its own cells.
So neurologically, excess sweets can also affect the gut-brain axis, the two-way communication between the gut and the brain. A healthy microbiome normally produces neurotransmitters and metabolites, such as serotonin and butyrate, that influence the mood and cognitive performance. So sugar and inflammation adversely affects these microbiomes' role in mental health, cognitive function, contributing to depression, anxiety, and memory troubles.
Yeah, and it says that some of the Halloween treats can be better. Sugar-coated nuts and fruit, such as honey roasted almonds and candy apples, rank among the top.
Yeah, but the quality of these fruits and nuts probably aren't great. They're probably GMO anyway.
So it depends on where you buy them.
Yeah, it's there's not much to say on that.
And we were looking at on the opposite side of the spectrum is the chewy treats such as candy corn, Skittles, Starburst, and Twizzlers. These are sugar-laden confections made mostly of high fructose corn syrup, saturated fats, and additives. They can increase the unsavory bacterial species in your gut and lead to inflammation, making them one of the least healthy Halloween choices.
Yes. So they give you some things about rebalancing and things like that. But the main thing is I think we should do away with this candy stuff and just, we want to make our children healthy. And right now, the real problem in America is not only unhealthy children, but unhealthy adults that are feeding these children.
Well, and also the migration of formerly adult diseases into the children.
Yeah. So
type 2 diabetes in a 7-year-old? No.
Yeah. I mean,
obesity among the elementary school kids.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so dangerous and so disappointing. And, in the end, it says all candies are high in sugar, which can be harmful when consumed in large quantities. Moderation and an otherwise balanced diet is the key to enjoying Halloween treats.
Yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much it. So this kind of concludes the whole thing about the bad food and how unhealthy we are. I'm hoping that no matter what you think of these elections, I know a lot of people on the left are going crazy and the people on the right are kind of confused and cheering.
Everybody's crazy.
Everybody's going kind of crazy. And, we've been liberals all our life, but I would like to see the change in the food. I think this is probably the number one problem here. The advertising, if that stops, the pharmaceutical advertising, which was never around when we were young, the advertising of food on the airways is not good food. Well, so if you just eliminate the food that's being advertised, you're going to be a heck of a lot healthier.
Well, and also, the pharmaceutical industry has turned out, no matter what's going on with you, take a pill.
Yeah.
Take a drug.
Yeah.
Get a prescription.
Maybe going to a veterinarian might be a better solution. At least he's going to talk about your diet, right? That's the first thing he's going to mention. So, and our doctors don't do that anymore. Not completely the doctor's fault if they're going through the traditional education. This is what they're taught. And most of the education after they become a doctor is these people coming into their offices that are selling drugs.
Well,
and these are the drug companies represent.
Aside from that, you have the pressure on the doctors to get as many patients in a day as possible.
Yeah,
they don't sit and talk. They don't get the information about you. They ask you to fill out a form when you get there, and it's got like 100 different diseases and syndromes. Do you have any of these?
Yeah.
But why am I going to the doctor if I already know?
Yeah. And I remember the last time I went to the doctor after I had all these tests and everything like that. The doctor comes in and says, "Geez, what the heck are you doing?
You're so healthy."
Yeah. And, I said, Come on. You should know that.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, that's our show for today. I appreciate you guys sticking around. If you would like the show, just hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, like button, whatever it is. And,
All of them.
Yeah, hit all of them.
That's
not the unlike, however.
Yeah,
Anyway.
right. Hit the subscribe, the like, and the
So we'll see you next time.
be
Thanks for
well.
sticking around. Bye.